Hi, welcome to the Crafts channel. I've got a lovely quilt to show you today. And this is what we call a square in square quilt. I don't know if you can see that. But it's made up of scrap fabrics, strips of fabric, if you've got a jelly roll that you don't know what to do with. These are all colour coordinated in shades of blue and green. But essentially what you have, if I can just, I'll put it on the overhead camera. You've got a darker square, a mid-tone square and a lighter square. And then next to it, you've got a dark square, a mid-tone and a lighter square. So it uses every scrap of fabric that you've got, because where you've cut an angle here, you're going to use that angle here. So I'm just going to throw this to one side, as I normally do, and show you how to start. Now these strips can be any size you like. I, for example, have just done these at 4 centimetres wide. They can be any length you like, because you're going to cut them into triangles. What I will suggest that you do though is, because we're going to sew these together to make a 3-strip wide piece of fabric, when you sew it right sides together, rather than matching up those raw edges, you just drop this down about the same amount as your strip would be less the seam allowance. And you'll think, why has she done that? And there is a really valid reason for it, and it saves wasting odd bits of fabric. I'm just going to put my reading glasses on so I can see that I'm sewing a straight line. So we'll stitch this with your normal 5mm or 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And obviously, because you've offset that strip at the top end, if you're cutting from the same length pieces of fabric, you'll find that you've got an extra bit at the bottom end, but that's absolutely fine. So again, sew your darker fabric and offset it by a similar amount. And sew all the way down. Doesn't matter which order you sew them in, as long as it's light, mid-tone, dark, or it can be dark, mid-tone, light. As long as your mid-tone is in the middle, because by the time you cut this up, you're going to use both edges of the triangle anyway. When you do this, make sure you don't catch up the previous piece of fabric that you've sewn. There you go. Now this is greatly offset because my pieces of fabric weren't all the same length to start with. But what you want to do when you've done that is you want to give it a good press. Now I don't have an iron to hand at the minute, so I'm going to show you one that I finger pressed earlier. And also show you why it is that we use this offset in the first place. So, lay your fabric out. And I've got a template here. We'll provide you with a template in the description below this video. But quite simply what it is, it's a right-angled piece of card that's then been cut at 45 degrees, and I've drawn parallel lines to that 45-degree angle all the way up the card, and I've snipped the top off because that's to allow for your seam allowance. If you line your template up with the top edge of your fabric, and then use these parallel lines to make sure that you've got it parallel with the stripes on your fabric. There's no point going like that and then cutting the triangle, because your fabric is going to be wonky. And this is why we've offset the fabric in the first place, because, let me just check that's parallel. We're going to cut this bit off. I'm not going to do it with a rotary cutter. I've found with this type of project it's notoriously difficult with a rotary cutter. It tends to skew it out because you're cutting on the bias. All I am going to do is I'm just going to draw on the correct side of the fabric with a very soft pencil, which doesn't show up very well on black, but never mind. And then move the fabric along, line up your cut-off end with the top of the fabric, this side with the pencil line that you've drawn, check everything's parallel, just come that way a bit, and then again draw some more lines. And it doesn't matter that you're marking the correct side of the fabric, because this will disappear into your seam allowance. I don't know if we'll squeeze one last one out of here. Look at that. Can I just say that was actually more luck than judgment? Although, again, just check everything is parallel. Provided that your seam allowances are good each time, you should be fine. Pop that to one side, and then just use a decent pair of scissors and cut out these triangles. So 1, 2. There you go, 4 triangles. And so as you can see, with these ones you've got the darker fabric as the point, with these ones you've got the darker fabric as the long edge. You want to pair up your triangles so they both match. If you've only got 3 types of fabric, then you can quite easily pair these blocks up like this. So your mid-tone is the same in the centre, but you've got a variation on the outside. Or we will use these ones here. So we have pale box around the outside and a dark one in the middle, or a dark box around the outside and a pale one in the middle. And we just sew them together like you would any other piece of patchwork, but just bear in mind that when you're sewing them together, because these have been cut on the bias, there's a certain degree of stretch. So you might just want to line up those seams to start with before you run down this seam. Just dropped a pin on the floor, remind me to pick that up in a minute. So that's one. So whichever way you have layered your pieces in the first place, make an exact same copy. So you've got these colours matching these colours. Pin it along those seams to make sure they line up. And just run down there very quickly. so that when you open them up, you have duplicates that you can then spin one of them round, and you've got your light, mid-tone, dark, and then you just sew them together along that long seam in the middle. Again, just line up your seams. Like so. And stitch all the way down that long edge, taking care not to stretch the fabric as you do it, because with the bias it will naturally want to stretch. Where your seam allowances have been pressed to one side, they do sometimes get caught up under your foot. So it's advisable to stop and just lift, stop with the needle in the fabric and then lift your foot over the top of them for a flatter finish. Ooh. Here you go. And that's your first block. Squares within squares. And when they're pressed and lined up neatly, you can see the two designs that are made with the darker outer and the lighter outer. And then when they're put together, they do make a really effective quilt, especially you use strong colours in coordinating fabrics, or even pastel colours in coordinating fabrics. From a distance, it's a great, not optical illusion exactly, but it is a beautiful looking quilt. So this one's going to my friend Lewis because he likes the colour. I hope your one goes to a good home or your own home, and I hope you enjoyed this demonstration, and we will see you again soon. Thank you very much for watching. If you've been inspired to create, please share your makes with us in the comments section below. And if you've enjoyed videos by the Crafts channel, hit the like button. Want to see more of us? Then click subscribe. See you next time.